stopped in a town and found everything, except the people. I wasn't supposed to be here. A detour, a missed exit, and my phone's GPS throwing a tantrum had landed me in this little speck of a town. Just a few hours off course, I told myself. Besides, a small-town diner's greasy breakfast sounded more appealing than another gas station sandwich. The sign read, "Welcome to Willowbrook." It had that quaint old-fashioned charm, the kind you'd see in picture books about Americana, white picket fences, red-bricked sidewalks, and charming little shops with hand-painted signs. The problem was, no one was there. Not a single car on the street, no strollers or pedestrians. It was as if the whole town had decided to sleep in late. I parked by a coffee shop called Brew and Biscuits. Its windows were clean, polished even, but inside the lights were off. I pushed open the door, and it chimed with a cheerful jingle that seemed too loud against the town's dead silence. Inside, everything was perfectly intact. Croissants lay arranged under a glass case, a pot of coffee still warm on the counter. "Hello?" I called. My voice sounded so small. Nothing but my own echo replied. I wandered through the town, my footsteps sounding too sharp against the deserted sidewalks. The supermarket's automatic doors swished open as I approached. Its shelves were fully stocked, carts lined neatly at the entrance, but no customers, no cashiers. It was like walking through a dollhouse frozen mid-play. Plates of half-eaten food sat on tables at a diner. Cars remained parked with doors left slightly ajar, the keys still in their ignitions. A baseball game paused mid-play in the park, the bat resting abandoned on the ground. I called out a few more times, my voice growing weaker with each attempt. There was no sign of panic or struggle, just absence. I should have left, gotten back in my car and sped away until my tires hit familiar roads. But curiosity had its claws in me, dragging me deeper into this unsettling stillness. I wandered into a house at the end of Harper Street. The door was unlocked, creaking as I pushed it open. Inside, family photos lined the walls, all smiles and summer vacations. The kitchen table was set for dinner, plates of steaming food that hadn't cooled. I reached out to touch a roast potato. It was still warm. How could this be possible? I moved from house to house, shop to shop. Every place was the same. Lived in, but vacant, as if everyone had left in the middle of living. By the time the sun began to dip below the horizon, I had circled back to my car, but something made me hesitate. A shape in the distance, near the center of town. I squinted and saw it was a phone booth, bright red, sticking out like a clown's nose against the sleepy pastels of Willowbrook storefronts. I hadn't noticed it earlier. When I reached it, the door hung slightly ajar. A low crackling sound seeped from the receiver dangling from its cord. Against all reason, I picked it up. At first, there was nothing but static, and then a voice. "Why are you here?" it whispered. The line went dead. I froze in the phone booth, the receiver still pressed to my ear. The voice on the other end had been a whisper, dry and distant, but unmistakable. My breath hitched. I shoved the phone back onto the hook and stepped out into the empty street. The wind had picked up, sending a loose newspaper skidding along the cracked pavement. The town was still silent, too silent. I turned on my heel and sprinted for my car. It was parked right where I left it, just past the diner, beside an old fire hydrant. I could see it. I could see the damn thing. But when I reached the curb, it was gone. Not stolen, not moved, gone. There weren't even tire tracks, just an empty space, like the car had never been there at all. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with panic. I pressed the screen, ready to call 911. No service. I swallowed hard. Glancing around, the town, stretched out in all directions, rows of lifeless buildings, neon signs flickering without sound, streetlights humming in the growing darkness. It felt wrong, like I was standing in a painting rather than a real place. Think. A landline phone. Perhaps the library? I had passed it earlier, a squat brick building with dust-covered windows. I bolted toward it, yanking on the door. It opened too easily, and I nearly stumbled inside. The air smelled stale, like old books and something else I couldn't name. I couldn't see any phones, but then a thought crossed my mind. There couldn't be Wi-Fi, could there? My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and searched for a network. And before long I saw it. New Wi-Fi network available. We are still here. My stomach lurched. I tried to connect, but my cell would just time out. Every time. A noise caught my attention. A chair slowly creaking, as if someone just stood up. I turned and ran. The town hall was the biggest building in Willowbrook, a white-columned relic from some forgotten decade. I didn't know what I expected to find inside. An old radio, a set of town records that explained what the hell was happening, anything. But when I shoved open the heavy oak doors, I found something worse. A desk with ledger. It sat in the middle of the grand hall, thick with dust, but open to the last page. I stepped forward, drawn to it, my breath coming too fast. My pulse hammered against my skull. It was a list of names, each one crossed out, except for the last, my own. A floorboard creaked behind me. I whirled around, and for the first time, someone was there. A man stood there, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, dark suspenders, a button-up shirt that might have once been white. His face was gaunt, his eyes tired. He spoke calmly, as if reciting something he had said too many times before. One must stay so the others can live. I took a step back. What? His expression was sad. Willowbrook isn't empty. The people, they're still here, but they need someone to hold the door open. Someone to keep the balance. I shook my head. No, that's insane. He gestured to the ledger. We all fought it at first. A clock chimed, midnight, and suddenly, I wasn't alone. The town came alive. Laughter echoed through the streets. The clang of a blacksmith's hammer rang out. The scent of fresh bread filled the air. Voices, dozens of them, hundreds, overlapping in conversation. The town was waking up, stretching, breathing. And then I felt it, a pull. Not physical, not a hand on my shoulder, but something deeper, something inside me. It was dragging me backward toward the desk, toward the chair in front of the ledger. The man's edges blurred, fading. We all fought it at first, he repeated. But someone has to be the keeper. The pull grew stronger. I gritted my teeth. If I stayed, I would fade. I would vanish from the world. My name scrawled, crossed out like all the others. The town would go on, thriving in its illusion of life. But if I ran, what happened to the town, and what would it do to stop me?